You're listening to the One Day Advice podcast, where your hosts Nick Riley and Paul Henderson are going to take you for a ride inside the world of personal finance. Together, we're going to give you a fully transparent, behind-the-scenes look into the financial services industry, helping you to optimize your financial life along the way.
So today we're looking at our early career type clients, and we're going to really cover five main things. The profile, like you just mentioned, why the industry doesn't really work or doesn't try to work for these early career professionals, the main questions that come up when we're sitting down with them as a financial planner, some generally applicable advice that could work, let's say, across the board, and then just a little bit of how we view younger clients, because that's a question that comes up more often than you'd expect. I hope we're not wasting your time or something like that. So circling back, early career, we tend to think of, or I tend to think of, in the 20s to 30s. It could be, I would say more typically late 20s, but if you find that great job right out of college, it could be 22. Typically, they're high earners. They've not yet accumulated a lot of assets, and by a lot of assets, I'm really saying they've not hit the million mark of investable assets, which gets them into the more traditional financial planning, RIA, fiduciary world. So less than $1 million in assets, relatively high income. And I guess if we want to be specific, I'd say for an individual over 100,000, for a couple probably closer to 200,000 is roughly what I would expect to be the right profile for where we could really add a lot of value.
Okay.
Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, that sounds about right. And as far as the our experience in the industry too, across other registered investment advisors, brokerage firms, I'd like to kind of give an overview to our listeners too on why the industry doesn't really tailor towards early career professionals, like we're going to be talking about today. So maybe I'll take a first stab at that, Paul. And
Sure.
So when it comes, I've worked on the brokerage side. I've worked on the independent registered investment advisory side, and like Paul mentioned, many of them require a certain level of assets to manage to meet their minimum fee, and they bill off of the investment balance that they have direct oversight and management over. So naturally, if you don't have assets for them to manage, there's no way for them to charge you for their service. They're not going to provide you the financial advice that you need because there's no revenue potential on their end. So here at One Day Advice, we have the ability to work with clients on an hourly basis or an ongoing subscription, neither of which require the client to have assets that we directly manage. So our goal is to build their net worth and grow their investable assets so they can kind of graduate into a higher tier of client base for us.
Yeah, and I would just add that that's unique because we know this industry, and we come from the managing assets background, but it might there are also people out there who just want to sell you a product, and they might make a similar comment or tell a similar story of, oh, I'm just trying to help you, I'm just trying to protect you, fill in the blank depending on what the product is. But there's kind of, I would say, for these early career people, they're getting ignored by the respectable side, and they are getting sold by the broker side, and that's kind of the rock and the hard place that they're finding themselves in.
Yeah, definitely. And you touched on it briefly there too, of just the financial product realm. So a insurance agent might say that they'll work with someone younger, and that's why a lot of Northwestern Mutual reps and insurance agents reps get people that are in college to buy their products, because they don't require an upfront payment. It's like an ongoing payment towards a whole life policy, and that allows the insurance agent to get an upfront commission and make it worthwhile to give them some advice as well around their personal finances. So that's oftentimes a big trap that people fall into is they start working with someone who is insurance focused and selling them a product that, in all, I mean, I don't want to bash the insurance
You're
side.
going to get some angry calls here.
Yeah, Paul, maybe you want to.
I'll just say that there's no. I agree with you, and I am very skeptical of life insurance in general. But there is a time and a place for it. I would say having in my experience, the time and the place has typically been for a multi-millionaire estate that is trying to do some creative planning around estate taxes. So tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. That's usually like the life insurance is a great vehicle in that situation. And term life policies, that's also if you're trying to protect cover a mortgage or protect your plan or pay for kids in college, all like that's usually a pretty good reason too. But that's not what's being sold to the 20, 22-year-old in college. So yeah, I think there's a time and a place for it, but it's frustrating because it's not usually when.
Yeah, I think a good way to put it too is just you shouldn't be paying for a financial product in order to get advice. And I think that's where One Day Advice fits in is people have the opportunity to pay for the advice that they need. That way it's unbiased, it's free from any conflict of interest. Whereas a financial product is it could be suitable for you at one point in time, but it may quickly not become suitable for you in the near future. So you really want to be paying for that kind of unbiased financial advice.
Yeah, and I'll kind of steal your comment that I've heard you make. If they're advertising at the Super Bowl, you maybe don't want to work with them. Just I'm sure if it's Coca-Cola, maybe it's a different story. But if it's your financial services provider and they have the money to advertise at the Super Bowl, just think twice about it. So I guess that's a lot of what not to do or why the industry doesn't work. Maybe we should shift a little bit more to what we do, why, and not just One Day Advice, but the RIA community, the Registered Investment Advisor, we'll say the fiduciary community, the fee only, and I'm using these words intentionally because there are things that you have to look for, and there are definitions that. It's sad, fiduciary, we have to put your interest in before ours. Shouldn't be something that, I have to really point out if you're paying me for financial advice, but we have to point that out because there's non-fiduciary and there's fee only and there's fee based where they will charge you a fee and then sell you something. So let's talk a little bit about what we as the fiduciary fee only side do with these types of clients. What are they paying for?
Yeah, definitely. So I think a common misconception too is that younger clients are just easier to work with. And that couldn't be more from not the case.
I still agree with that.
Yeah. So, retirement planning typically is a big thing that people go to financial planners for. And oftentimes, people in their later stage of their career where they're starting to think more about retirement. Whereas the early career professionals, they're wanting to understand how to optimize their financial situation so they can reap the benefits long term. So by that I mean, saving up for short-term savings goals, even long-term savings goals, buying a first home, growing a family, just navigating their career path too. So, people wanting to take a sabbatical or change career, go back to school, seek further education. So there's so many decisions in life that are attached to a dollar sign, and anything attached to a dollar sign is a decision that should be at least ran by a financial planner who is working in your best interest.
Yeah, and I think I would just add to that. There's the big picture questions, but I find myself often having more of the nitty gritty, and the way I like to phrase it for clients is when you get that email about benefits changing, or anything that comes from HR, like, oh hey, here's the new fill in the blank, you can just forward that to us. And it's partly what's fun for us, because we get to solve new problems, or see new things that are coming out. I enjoy working with the wealth accumulators, as opposed to people who have already made their money and are now retired, because it's dynamic. There's a lot of interesting things that are going on. And often, I'll use Microsoft as an example. There's some really kind of creative uh, benefit structures out there, and it's fun to come in and be like, okay, you probably think that it's only the old people at Microsoft who care about this, but you should care about it too, even though you're only in your 20s or in your 30s, and you're just focused on trying living in a new city, and all that entails. So I enjoy the education side of, let's talk about your 401k. Let's talk about your ESPPs. Let's talk about, your RSUs, and make sure that there's a plan, not just, they don't just happen to you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And when it comes to, navigating, like you said, the company benefits side, navigating stock options and all of that, and dealing with relocating. So if you're wanting to move to California to enjoy the beach and the sunshine and get away from the rainy Seattle winters, those are all financial decisions that we love to help people navigate. And as far as
how much do you love the sun versus taxes?
Yeah, sometimes I just want them to take me with them when we're
just
planning
depends
around
on
vacations.
the day.
And yeah, exactly. So, beyond that, so some generally applicable advice that we give to clients at this stage of their career. Paul, do you want to kind of highlight some of those?
Yeah, and I'm just thinking of all the. This is generally applicable. We don't know your situation. You fill in the disclaimers there, but I'm trying to. The easiest one is just make sure that you're getting your match from your 401k. It sounds straightforward, but it's surprisingly easy for people just to say, I want the money in my pocket. I'm not ready to think about retirement. So that's just an easy take that match. It gets a little complicated if your employer matches all the way up to the full amount. Then you have to say, well, can I afford that? So there are some caveats there, but look for that. If your company offers an ESPP, employee stock purchase plan, that tends to be a way to get a pretty quick 10%, 15% discount on stock. That's not bad. So look at that. I'm trying to think of those are the company ones. I would say cash flow. Pay attention to your cash flow. I think you and I have talked about lifestyle creep a little bit, and maybe you want to take this, but I would say pay a little bit of attention to what you're spending, and make sure that you're happy that if you bought something, make sure you're happy that you bought it, and it's not just the Instagram purchase, or whatever it is that drives your purchases.
Yeah, and like I was watching Shark Tank last night, actually, and they're always going to ask you for the numbers. So as when you're running your own household too, your own household finances, you have to know your numbers. What amount do you have coming in each month from your salary, either other income sources, and then know on average how much money you have going out. So understanding your savings rate on a monthly basis that you can then annualize and kind of plan around. So ideally, you want to be paying yourself first. So every time you get a paycheck, put a certain amount aside, whatever that amount is. Any amount is better than nothing. So I like to lead with maybe 10%. But if 10% isn't possible with your current cash flow situation, find out ways that you can cut costs to increase your savings rate and put that money, set it aside into a long-term investment account that can start working for you and start compounding. So I think that's very important, is just knowing your numbers as a personal finance perspective.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about the importance of cash flow, but also cash reserve, and making sure that you have depending on your situation, somewhere between, let's say, 6 to 18 months of cash on hand. And it's not just for an emergency; it's also it gives you some flexibility on do you want to take a different job, or do you want to take a risk? Do you want to do something that means that maybe your current income's not going to be consistent?
Yeah.
Having cash is super helpful for that.
Exactly. And having those types of emergency funds or cash on hand, the factors that come into play around that are, how many different income sources do you have? So if you're a couple that both of you work, and one was to lose your job, I mean, the likelihood of both of you losing your job or both of you getting disabled at the same time is very low. So the more income sources that you have, the lower amount of months that you might necessarily need to have cash on hand for. The other thing to consider too is I always think about worst case scenario. If you did lose your job and you were reliant on someone else, do you have a family member you can fall back on? Do you have financing options to fall back on? So you have to really kind of prepare yourself financially, and the best way to do that is to pay yourself first and start to build up that you kind of cash fund.
And I like the idea of really examining your own situation, because everyone is unique. Every situation is unique, and there's not a catch-all. There's, we often have this conversation of like, well, is this normal? Is this what I should be doing? Is this the rule of thumb? It's like, well, there are some rules of thumbs, but really in general, it depends on your situation. And so don't just stress yourself out on Reddit or finance blogs or whatever. Really know your situation and your personal finances, and make sure that whatever advice you find is really tailored to you. I think you can hurt yourself by applying advice incorrectly.
Yeah. And on the topic of knowing your numbers too, another number to know is how much are you paying in fees, and that can be wrapped into bank transfer fees, overdraft fees. So your banker, banking institution might have a lot of fees wrapped into it. You might be paying high fees inside your investment accounts, you might be paying more for your auto insurance than you should be. So it's always, from an insurance perspective, when you're looking for homeowners or renters insurance or auto insurance, it's important to shop around every couple of years, I would say, to make sure that you are getting a good deal on that. So just keeping conscious of the fees that are that you're paying inside these insurance products or investment products or your bank accounts is very important, because those are ways that you can easily put money back into your pocket rather than into the institution's pocket.
I was going to say it's a 15-minute call to, shop around and see if maybe you could be not just, saving money on, so let's say auto insurance, but possibly improving your auto insurance. Maybe you got that when you were 22 and, it was just the bare minimum. And, that's probably, maybe it's time to review that. I would also, I think maybe the last comment on this one is around debt and knowing your numbers and knowing the interest rates that you're paying. Often we'll have a conversation with people about credit card debt. Like, some debt is okay. Mortgages, if you've refied your mortgage recently and you're paying, 2 something low 3%, that's not bad. If you're paying 18 to 20% on a credit card, that is, basically unequivocally bad. So, those are other numbers that you should be paying attention to. And just, it kills me when I see people carrying a balance on their credit card, particularly if they have the ability to pay it off and, not do that in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's definitely lots of other advice that we could provide for this age group, people at this stage in their careers. But the other thing that we wanted to talk about too, prior to closing, wrapping up the episode, is kind of how do we view younger clients? Paul, do you want to kind of address this?
I do. I think I wanted to include this part particularly because we get approached by people who are like, well, I don't know if I belong. I don't know if you want to talk to me. And part of this is, sometimes people have been turned away by places that are like, hey, if I can't make 10,000 off of you, I'm not going to work with you. So like there's a bit of a moat around our industry sometimes, or they've been turned off by a super aggressive salesperson. So you get these people coming that are a little bit unsure about if they want to talk to you, if I want to talk to them. And, I think what I want to put out there is we definitely want to talk to you. If you fall in this group that we're talking about, the early career, high earner, maybe not a lot of assets yet, but that's your direction that you're going, half an hour, we can figure out if there's a good, mutual fit, if there are some red flags that need to be addressed. We're happy to turn people away if it's not a good fit, but we'll make sure that you're going in the right direction. And that might be pay down your credit cards. That might be, pay attention to your spending. But I think you tell me if you agree or feel the same way. I look at it as I love getting to have these conversations with people in their 20s and 30s because you can fix a lot in your 20s that you can't necessarily fix when you're in your 50s and 60s.
No, it's that is so true. And when it comes down to just working with people, we lead with education. I mean, we're doing this podcast not because we're looking to monetize it. We're doing the podcast because we want to educate people, and it's. That's why we want to be able to have conversations with as many people as possible. Not everyone's going to be the right fit for our services. We're going to want to educate and empower people to manage finances on their own. But we also understand the fact that life is busy. It gets very busy. And some people might not want to spend their Friday night or Saturdays and Sundays planning around their finances. They want to delegate that and have those conversations with a professional. So that's where we can really, help our clients leverage their personal financial situation and really start to optimize that for, and get on a good track for the next 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 plus years, you name it. I don't know what the type of healthcare we have coming up. I mean, we might live past our 100 years old, and so we've got a lot of time ahead of us.
I would just last comment would be, if you just need it for a year, there are people that will sign on, and because we lead with education, feel like, okay, I feel like I understand what's going on, and now I'm ready to do this on my own. We also have people who come on saying, okay, I'm going to do this for a year, and then I'll feel good and I'll move on. And after a year, they're like, I am so happy that I have someone to reach out to, and it's just the peace of mind of knowing that you guys are paying attention to this and you'll reach out if something comes up. I think it's fun for us to see, how people feel after they've really kind of learned about their own personal finances.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we've addressed this topic enough for this episode. I'm sure we'll go into these topics in much further detail down the road. But for now, we appreciate you listening, and don't hesitate to reach out to us with any specific questions that you have or ideas that you'd like us to address on this podcast. Hi, I'm Nick Riley, the founder of One Day Advice. If you like what you've heard, we'd greatly appreciate your help in spreading the word. After all, we are financial educators, not marketers. Thanks for listening, and remember to leave us a review.
Nick Riley is the founder of One Day Advice, an independent registered investment advisor. Paul Henderson is the director of financial planning at One Day Advice. Both Nick and Paul serve as wealth advisors to their clients. All opinions expressed by Nick, Paul, and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of One Day Advice. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment or financial decisions.